Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Twitch. So good evening if you're watching along live. Our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community, and without you, we couldn't make this show each week. So a big thank you as always. Coming up on the podcast, last week it was on. This week it seems to be very much off again. A game against a mid-table team with a lengthy injury list and nothing to play for. And you know what happens next. We'll look at what went wrong in Cardiff. Tuesday sees a trip to Leicester. That's for our game in hand. Going to preview that game and look at the possible impact on the run-in. And if you're searching for some positives, then there was the Preston game last week. We're going to cover that too. My name is Martin Starke, and joining me, as always, this evening, Steve Grant, the owner of Saints Web. Alfie House is senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo, and Glen Cour is writer of the blog League One -10. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 274 of the Total Saints podcast. So we start, as always, with a shout out to our Patreon community because their monthly contributions support our show. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of those tiers has different perks like access to an ad-free version of the podcast. There's an exclusive TSP t-shirt. We do the FPL and you get access to our events and much, much more. Now, the anger management session will begin shortly, but first I need to tell you about the live show that we've been planning. I'm really happy to say we can finally share the details for our live show. That's not a live stream. This is going to be actually live in person, and it's going to be in a pub, and a good pub as well. We're going to be hosting it at Steamtown in Eastleigh. Now, the date for the calendar is Thursday, the 9th of May. Going to be kicking off at around 7 o'clock. Now, we're very limited on space, so the tickets are currently going out to TSP patrons first. And if you're listening to this and you're in our Mick Shannon tier, you've got first dibs. You can head to your Patreon inbox now for all the ticket details. Now, it sounds a bit like an away game, this, because we're going to be releasing tickets to members in our Francis Benali tier on Tuesday evening, and then the James Beattie patrons on Thursday evening, and finally the Bobby Stokes patrons on Saturday evening if there are any left. So there's quite a short window to secure your space, and as I said, we've only got a limited number of seats to give away, so please don't leave it too late. And of course, if you can't make it, we'll be filming the whole episode and releasing it as a podcast as usual, so you won't miss out. And if you're interested in attending more events and meetups like this in the future, you can get involved in supporting the podcast as well each month. Just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for all the details. You'll find the links in the podcast show notes and also on the YouTube description. Now, it's another one Saints should have won comfortably, but instead we're sat here talking about a 2-1 defeat in Cardiff. Glenn, there was a few words flying around on social media yesterday. Unacceptable seemed to be one used by the manager and some of the players as well. Is that the first word that came to your mind?
No, I can't repeat what the first word came to my mind was. Well, it's classic Southampton, isn't it? It's, you know, we begin to get everyone's hopes up and we begin to believe that it might be possible, having come from a long way back. We win 3 games in a row. Everyone else is stumbling and you think, yeah, keep it going. But the pressure ramps up game after game, you know, with this run. And as we've seen many a time, when the pressure's on, we blow it. I think if we'd won yesterday, we'd probably get smashed at Leicester. I just think that's the way. Funnily, this probably makes that game a little bit easier. We just don't seem to handle the pressure. Started the game very well. Team selection, you know, he brought Will Smallbone in for Flynn Downs. I think there was a collective intake of breath when that happened. But with Cardiff being basically a reserve team mixed with some youth players and the odd smattering of first team players, thought it'd probably be okay. First hour, we played really, really well in all but one key detail. We obviously scored the first goal, Joe Aribo. Good finish from where he was. But, I mean, I counted 7 chances that we really... 6. 3 good ones and 3 that you really should be scoring one of them. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like we found different ways to miss. It was just stunning. Che Adams missed a couple. The David Brooks one is unbelievable. He had 2 opportunities to put that ball into an empty net and didn't take either.
Shot.
Didn't even have a shot. Did so it doesn't go on the stats, as a missed chance. I mean, what he was doing, he just took a touch around when he could have shot first time, and then he could have shot second time, and he decided to take another touch, and then the goalkeeper got to him. Just ridiculous. Adam Armstrong had that header in the second half. Great cross from Shay Adams. Adam Armstrong could have put it bottom corner, top corner, or just inside the post. Instead, he heads it in just about the only place where the goalkeeper's got a chance of saving it. So, to me, that was poor as well. And then the game, you just saw it going about an hour. After about an hour, you saw Cardiff start to make a few sort of inroads. And I think, here we go again. It's like the Ipswich game again. There's this point where it turns. They score with their second attack or whatever it was. A little bit fortunate in that he's hit the shot. It's going wide, and there's a guy free at the back post behind Jamesbury as usual, and he sticks it in the net. 1-1, and then the substitutions come, and the substitutions were unbelievable. I thought in their ineptitude. Just all 4 of them, Rothwell, Edozie, Suleiman, Fraser, all absolutely useless. And it just staggers me that, we had Shay Charles there, and I think sometimes you need a foundation. If you build a house without a foundation, it falls down. And I just thought at that stage we needed someone to come on to try and reassert control of that midfield, because we'd lost it at that point. And bringing Rothwell on, he might score a belter from 30 yards, but the chances are he's not going to give you any more control in the midfield, which is what we'd lost. And it almost became funny at the end. I knew Cardiff would score again, and the lad cuts in, Suleiman jogs alongside him, Rothwell backs off, Stuart Armstrong jumps out of the way, and he scores with a deflection. It's a 17-year-old or something playing his first game, and just think that just sums it up. It was just the game management from an hour onwards was pathetic. The team played really well for the first hour, but we've had Shay Adams and Adam Armstrong have both been on good form recently, but they returned to the other end of the scale yesterday and against Cardiff, and that's a real shame, and that's why we're ultimately going to end up in the playoffs, and these next 3 games are not really going to mean that much.
I assume you're going to agree with most of that, Alfie. I mean, the game plan meant we created those chances, so it kind of feels like it fell on the forward 3. You look at Brooks, Adams, and Armstrong, all guilty, and that's ultimately the reason why we didn't get that win.
Yeah, I mean, it falls on the forward 3 for what happened in that 60 minutes, in terms of not finishing the chances. Adams had a couple one-on-one, like Brooks already mentioned. I actually did think the Adam Armstrong header was quite a good effort, to be fair. It was well saved, but equally that one as well. But I think it falls on the mentality of every player involved in being totally honest with you. I don't think you could just solely blame the front 3, although they should have been 5 or 6-0 ahead. They've done this before, haven't they, in terms of the big moment is finally here, the pressure's on, and they crumble. And when Famara Jeju gets that goal, I don't think anybody is surprised about what happened next. I think Glen summed up perfectly the game management and players coming on, but I just think that it's every time maybe every time is a bit harsh, but a lot of the times when they're asked a question of them, can you deliver it? Are you going to stand up to the test? They don't do so. And, the pressure was off. They did an amazing job to get themselves back into the hunt. Winning 3 at home, that, and then all of a sudden we're back in it. Talks of maybe it'll happen. Other teams give up results, and then they get it wrong again. So fine. I agree with the Smallburn thing. I think it's a little bit puzzling that Shay Charles doesn't get any minutes, especially in the back end of the game. But in a game like that, where they've absolutely dominated, they've created so many chances, the decision to start with Smallburn is fine. It worked. They should have been miles ahead. It's the end of the game for me. So I agree with Glen with that. I asked Rustin Martin about Shay Charles, and he didn't massively like me asking. He thinks he's had a brilliant season for a young man. He thinks he's played lots of minutes, but if you look, he's only played 169 minutes in 2024. I think he's maybe made 2 substitute appearances in the last sort of 9 or 10 games, and a couple of those was when Flynn Downs wasn't available as well. So I think that's a little bit of a worry. But the worst news that we haven't even mentioned is the fact that Stuart Armstrong goes off in when the game's already lost. The season's already over until the playoffs. and they lose to Armstrong, who's obviously one of the most creative players. Somebody who's been here for 6 years, played who knows how many games, so important, and it looks a real bad one for him. Just a couple of days after Gavin Bazunu as well. So it was a really, really, really frustrating. I was angry at the end. I must admit, I was unbelievably frustrated because they've, for lack of a better word, and this doesn't sum up their entire season. I think they've been brilliant, but they bottled that chance there. They had the game, they had it won, and they bottled it, unfortunately. So they're going to need to show some steel. They're going to need to show a bit better than that if they're going to win the playoffs. We know that.
Yeah. The playoffs are going to be, I know he described yesterday as the biggest game of the season, but the playoffs are going to be huge. And every time we've had a really important game, they don't seem to be able to deliver. And that worries me going into the playoffs. Steve, we've had loads of messages, as you can imagine, loads of comments, people really upset and angry about the performance yesterday. James says, absolutely gut-wrenching, still really disappointed, but it's been a problem all season. You can play all the pretty football you like, but there needs to be an end product. Just on that, nobody scored more goals in the league than we have. So how is it going so wrong? Do we just need to learn how to win 1-0? Is that part of the problem?
I mean, possibly, but I mean, yesterday, that game against Cardiff should be 5-0 at half time, and nobody's batting an eyelid, and everyone's getting really excited ahead of Tuesday night.
Yeah.
That is how dominant and actually how well we played. So I think the kind of criticism of no end product, actually we created plenty of end product. There were chances there, and there were very, very simple chances that somehow professional footballers have managed to completely fluff their lines. And I mean, I would expect League Two players to score some of the chances that we created in that game, especially in the first half. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we were so much sort of in control of the game, even though, I mean, Cardiff offered sort of sporadic threat down the wings, I thought, in the first half. They got in behind both our fullbacks a little bit. But at the end of the day, I don't think they had a shot. I mean, certainly no sort of shots in anger that caused Alex McCarthy any difficulty. So we were well in control, and even Smallbone playing as the 6 was fine. Because we had so much possession and we were always on the front foot, him being 5-10 yards further forward than Flynn Downs usually would be, was absolutely fine. It actually made a little bit of sense because it meant that we were forcing Cardiff's midfield to sit even deeper. But yeah, you can't expect to miss as many presentable chances as we did. I mean, I can't think of another game that we've had this season where we've created as many sort of glaring chances as that. Like even some of those games that we won sort of 4s and 5s, we generally created maybe 6 or 7 chances and scored 5 of them. Whereas, I mean, here we've had, I think I saw we had 18 shots in that first half. But unfortunately, we've only got, I think, 4 on target. So that's the problem, and ultimately, it's kind of been the problem all season. In that, I mean, if Adam Armstrong was even half clinical, then he'd have had 40 this year. I mean, if you can think back to chances that both he and Shay Adams have missed throughout this season in games, whether it's been an important chance that they've missed and it cost us points, or whether it's been one that's kind of inconsequential because we've gone on and won the game comfortably anyway. They've all added up, and ultimately, yeah, we've not taken the chances we had, and you always leave yourself open, especially the way we play. And ultimately, we're not a very good defensive team. We are much better going forward and trying to control the game sort of in our own way. When other teams try and play it on their terms, we're far less confident and far less comfortable, which is why our defensive record is as it is. And it's why, despite being the leading scorers in the league, we're still only in 4th place. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously a balance. I mean, I'm kind of still certainly on the side of being a more attack-minded side than sort of necessarily shoring up the defensive side of things. But that doesn't mean that you completely disregard it. And I think there are things that are going to need to be done in the summer, regardless of which division we're in. I mean, God help our defence if we go up, because that defence is going to get torn to pieces by basically everybody. So yeah, I mean, there's going to need to be a lot of reinforcement there if we do make it through the playoffs. But as you say, the games get ramped up in terms of their importance once you get into that sort of postseason setup. And yeah, and we've not proven ourselves capable of getting over the line in those sort of decider games, if you like. So yeah, that's a big concern. Got to have the ability, but you've also got to have the heart alongside it. And Cardiff game sort of ably demonstrated a distinct lack of it in the last 20 minutes or so.
There was a time, Glenn, when we would look at the bench and go, actually, do you know what? This is really strong, and there's a lot of people on there that can make a real difference when they come in. I don't get that feeling anymore at 2:00 on a Saturday. And it's the same sort of names. Is it just that they're not having the impact that they were, or are they coming on at the wrong time? Something's not working with the changes that he's making.
I think earlier on in the season that there were a lot of games where we were still on top, but we weren't really. We were level on the scoreboard or something like that, but we were still playing relatively well. I think there's a bit of a difference between that and doing what we had yesterday, for example, which is we're really not playing very well at the moment, and we threw on 3 wingers in one go. Asked one of them to play. I mean, Ryan Fraser was kind of playing in midfield, but when you look at it at that point, we had a midfield 3 of Rothwell, Stuart Armstrong, and Ryan Fraser. Now that's no basis to win any game, because there's just that's 3 players who can only attack. Really,
when you say it like that,
there's not a lot else there. So I found it really random that 3 wingers came on. It was almost like chucking stuff at a wall and hoping it worked. I mean, Sam Adozie has gone right off the boil since he's been. It's not surprising because he's been left out the team and hardly had any minutes. Suleimana's never been on the boil, ever. I mean, he tried his best to get sent off yesterday, didn't he, as well, and knocked himself out. And it was just a crazy performance that kind of sums him up. But yeah, the bench is not as strong. And we used to have Charlie Alcaraz, of course, and he would always be one that, yes, he was a little bit random, but he had a lot more quality about him. I think there was kind of more of an expectation that he would give you something both in terms of passing and having shots himself. But that's that ship has sailed now. But yeah, we just leave it too late. We seem to wait till we concede before we try something rather than being proactive. I mean, this reminded me so much of the Ipswich game in that respect, is that you could see it going wrong before they equalised, but there was no activity, bench-wise, to either shore things up or change the formation or anything like that until the goal went in, by which time the other team had got their tails up. We're suddenly in a spot of bother, and I don't think throwing wingers on, it really, really changes the direction of travel of a game. Sometimes I think, if you replace one with another when you're doing well, then it can make a difference because you're bringing on a fresh player. But the substitutions for me just didn't work at all yesterday. And if you look at all, I mean, James Breen, not so much. I know I've dug him out a little bit on the first goal, but he wasn't too bad. But the 4 that came on at the back end of the game, they were kind of 2 out of 10 jobs. All 4 of them. All 4 of them made the team worse, to be honest. They'd been better off making no subs at all. Yeah.
And when you hear they're coming on, though, you see that they're coming on. It doesn't even fill you with the hope that we're going to get anything out of the game anymore. That's the problem. A couple of other comments. I mean, Alfie, I know you mentioned Stu Armstrong. A lot of people saying that's probably the last time we've seen him in a Saints shirt. I guess we'll find out a bit more tomorrow when you speak to the manager. But I'm just wondering if there's an outcome where he does stay. Do you think there's still a bit up in the air about that, or do you think that would have been his last game for us?
Yeah, I don't know really. I wouldn't be able to give you a proper answer on it. I mean, it was clearly heading towards him leaving in the summer, in my opinion. But this may change things. Russell Martin said that it looks like a bad one. He obviously left the stadium on crutches, and don't think people have already reported that maybe that's going to put an end to his European Championships hopes as well. So maybe if it's a really bad one like Gavin Bazunu, which is 9 or 10 months, and he's not fit until November, December, then no other team's going to give him a contract until he probably gets fit. Maybe it's a case of Southampton giving him a short-term deal just so that he can use the facilities, stay fit, give him a little bit of a wage and all this sort of thing. They've done that before. So there was a youth player called Sam Bailey, who was, I think he was 18 or 19 years old, and basically hadn't played a game from October 2020 to summer 2022 because he had a couple injuries, he had an infection in the injury and all this sort of stuff, surgery. And they gave him another year contract last year to sort of keep him on for a bit longer, try and get fit, play some games, showcase yourself. Obviously, Stuart Armstrong's at a totally different end of his career, doesn't need to showcase himself in that way, but maybe that will happen. We don't know. But either way, it's not the end to the season that he deserved or needed, and he would have been such a key player in the playoffs. Obviously, there's nobody in that midfield quite like him, as Glen points out, who really is a lock picker in that regard. Joe Rothwell might welly one in from the edge of the area, and I think the midfield probably now will be, when everybody's fit, Flynn Downs, Will Smallbone and Joe Rebo. But I do think you just lose a little bit of something with Stuart Armstrong there. So massive shame for him. And it's something that they got to deal with now.
He's had his ups and downs.
It's a bit of a cautionary tale as well, isn't it, for players who let their contract run down? When they're not covered, because technically he's probably on a salary until July the 1st, I think it is, when contracts normally run out. But that's a problem that you can do without. He's kind of relying on the club doing right by him, and the club have no real obligation to do so. So it's a bit of a cautionary tale. You hear about players running down their contracts all the time, and obviously we've got Che Adams doing the same thing. So it's the downside of doing that, illustrated in very black and white terms, I think.
Essentially, Steve, a month ago we were talking about the playoffs. So in that regard, nothing's really changed. But it was just that little glimmer of hope, wasn't it, that gets you in the end every time.
It's been a roller coaster couple of 2 or 3 weeks, hasn't it, since Easter, really. When we thought we'd got ourselves into position, the other 3 sides have been falling over themselves to stumble over the line. And good Lord, Leicester are probably now, you would think, are probably going to win the title, which I think we all thought they would do after about 3 weeks earlier in the season, but certainly not in the way that that it looked like, because they've been deeply unimpressive for the vast majority of the last 6 months, quite frankly. But it does show the madness of this division at the moment, that you can't. Teams can only be consistent for a certain period. You can only keep it up for as long as kind of your name's not on a list of teams that are going to have their turn at making a complete tit of themselves. And all 4 of us have done it in the last week. That we've all stumbled when you look down the fixture lists of who we've all played, and you thought, well, that's going to be a win for them, that's going to be a win for them, that's going to be a win for them, and that's going to be a win for us. And none of us have done it. At the end of the day, all 4 of us are absolute bottle jobs. So obviously Norwich are going to get promoted now. But no, we'll see. It suddenly becomes a very different proposition once you're into knockout, effectively knockout football. 2 legs gives it a little bit more context, but essentially it is win and in. And as soon as you lose, you're off for the summer, and that's your season done. Usual cliches: regroup from Saturday, go for Tuesday, and at the end of the day, if we play like we did in the first hour at Cardiff, at Leicester, we'll give them problems. But the thing is, how confident are we that we're actually going to take the chances that we're likely to create? And that is ultimately the thing that will cost us throughout this. That's been happening all season. There's been missed chances costing us wins. We've drawn a lot of games that we should have won. We've lost some games that either we should have drawn or should have won. And there haven't been an awful lot of games that we've won when we should have lost. So it's been frustrating at the top end of the pitch. Obviously defence hasn't been perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but if we'd scored as many goals as we really should have done, then the defence is under no pressure whatsoever.
I think missed chances costing us wins would be the name of our Netflix documentary if they were doing one this season. I'm going to ask you all for player of the season, player of the week as well in just a minute. We will get onto the Leicester game as well. On Tuesday night, of course, there was the Preston game, and everything was looking up. Everything was rosy. There were a few talking points from that game that we need to square off first. Alfie, I think the goalkeeper getting injured in the warm-up was probably the biggest until his replacement was announced, and that was an even bigger story. That was a shock to see Alex McCarthy starting.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that is bizarre. I think that's probably the first time in my life I've ever seen a player who wasn't actually in the squad jump straight into the 11. Obviously, that's just the virtue of the goalkeeper rules being slightly different. First of all, Gavin Bazunu is obviously going to be out for 9 or 10 months with a ruptured Achilles. It's the same injury that young defender Dinel Semedo had at the start of this season. He's still not playing. He's still not back. So it's a long one. It's a really long journey. It's obviously a blow to the way that Saints play, and it probably means that they're going to have to buy a first-team goalkeeper in the summer, you'd imagine, because unless they make some kind of massive U-turn on giving McCarthy a new contract, which I wouldn't be surprised by, but I don't think that'll happen. I think probably this is the end of that. So in terms of bringing McCarthy in, I asked Russell Martin about it. He said that he hadn't actually had a chance to properly explain it to Joe Lumley before the game kicked off, and he was going to have to talk to him after, but he was understandably not happy about it. It was a big decision. He said that he just wanted to see what McCarthy could do playing. He obviously hadn't played any minutes since Gillingham. I think that's the only appearance he's had this season, and that went brilliantly.
That went well,
yeah. But he's obviously seen what Joe Lumley could do in a couple of FA Cup games, and that for me, that answer must just mean that he's not 100% convinced by him. Because if
we gave him a new contract.
Well, that is a good point. Yeah. But then this is what makes it even all the more puzzling. But if you were that convinced by him, you'd have just played him, surely. But then, maybe
I was in the ground when it all happened. I saw Bazunu. I didn't see Bazunu injure himself. I saw him getting carried off. Russell Martin came out onto the pitch. He gathered all the starting 11 together and was having a chat with them. So was he saying, "Who do you want in goal?" Or was he informing them of the decision? I don't know.
I can't have been a player decision, surely.
You wouldn't have thought so, but
it's that definitely was call, though, isn't it? It's that stranger call that we're going to ask.
It's that stranger call, and the excuses, if you want to call them that, the reasoning behind it that he gave just doesn't wash. So it's a bit of a strange one, because he said stuff like, "Oh, we haven't got an actual number 2." Well, yes, you have, because he's sat on the bench all season,
the entire season.
Yeah. All McCarthy's doing, he's not played a single game for any team. All he's doing is taking corners in the warm up. That's it. He's getting paid whatever he is to do that. So maybe it was just a training ground thing, a gut feeling thing. But yeah, I mean, Joe Lumley seems the kind of guy who has probably reluctantly accepted it, but he must have been furious, absolutely livid. Sat on the bench for 40 games or whatever, assuming he was second choice. So yeah, it was strange. But that meeting on the pitch definitely happened. I didn't imagine that. And Taylor Harbour-Bellis seemed to be saying at one point to Lumley that he was giving him the thumbs up and stuff like that. And
oh no,
so something strange happened, and I can't really explain it, but that meeting definitely happened.
There's a good comment that's just gone into the chat, actually. I think Stephen Wright, who says that maybe there's a financial reason why McCarthy hasn't been on the bench. I don't know if there's anything in his contract that says that if he sits in the squad, he earns a bigger wage, and therefore what's the point of having him in the squad? But when it actually comes down to it, would you rather have McCarthy in the team? So that's pure speculation, obviously, but maybe that's one other reason, maybe.
These are all good theories, aren't they? And all good explanations. The irony, Steve, is that there's an argument and a school of thought that says we actually might have played slightly better in that first half. We were obviously talking about Gavin Bazunu recently, and it's not what any of us would have wanted to see, but we'd had those questions about whether Lumley comes in. I don't think we'd ever said that maybe Alex McCarthy should start, but we certainly weren't playing the ball back to the keeper as much, were we?
We weren't, but it also helped that Preston, after the first 3 minutes, were absolutely pathetic.
Terrible.
I mean, that was a team that basically knew that they'd blown their season on the Saturday, and come the Tuesday night, just didn't fancy it. I mean, they had a couple of players playing out of position as well. Ex-Skate, Jack Watmo playing in central midfield, which is an interesting one for a guy who's been a centre back basically since he was about 12 years old, as far as I gather. And Dwayne Holmes playing at right wing back was
hilarious.
Was a fascinating one, because I mean, this guy, I think he's kind of a winger stroke sort of nippy sort of forward, sort of support striker type player. And Ryan Lowe thought putting him at right wing back up against Adam Armstrong and Ryan Manning was a really good idea, and that went really well, didn't it? He got booked early on, shanked the clearance for the third goal. Could have been sent off for giving away the free kick on the edge of the area, and was then subbed with 3 minutes of the first half to go. So yeah, that was a fine night for him. But I mean, in fairness, we played really well, I thought.
Is that one of the best 45 minutes of the season?
Yeah, I mean, you can only beat what's in front of you, but also I think that was one of the few occasions where we've scented blood and we've actually gone for it.
Yeah,
because I mean, there was that. I mean, we obviously scored the 3 goals in the space of about 10, 12 minutes, I think. But either side of that, we could have had 2 or 3 more. And it was a proper, absolute pasting for 25, 30 minutes of that first half. Once we got into half time, it was like, right, okay, well, the game's won. Let's just kind of manage it through. And even then, we still created 2 or 3 decent opportunities. Yeah. Keepers made 2 good saves.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was kind of perfect night ahead of the sort of from a midweek game where you kind of just want to get in and get out and get the job done. They got it done in 45 rather than 90, so you could afford to take things a bit easier in the second half, which should have helped ahead of
yeah. Set you up for a nice game at the weekend. I was going to say, Glenn, as well, Jack Stevens obviously was dropped onto the bench. Yeah, the undroppable Jack Stevens playing with some proper fullbacks. Was that close to our strongest 11 when you saw that team use?
I didn't have a single thing to complain about when I saw when I saw the team use. I mean, obviously the McCarthy thing was the headline news, but then you saw the I think obviously Manning coming into the side. I thought he played really well, by the way. Did he get injured yesterday in the first half, or did he just?
Yeah, so he had like a bit of a knock on his foot, dead leg sort of thing, but he feels better already, so he'll play on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I thought that was one of. Again, any sort of praise has to be caveated as to the big caveat of the fact that Preston were diabolical. Yeah, but I thought Manning had a really good game. Just the whole back four looked assured. As I said before, it's not to do with Jack Stevens being in the team or not being in the team. It's to do with having a balanced team. Yeah. Left-footed left back, right-footed right back, all that old-fashioned stuff that no one tends to do anymore. Obviously, Flynn Downs was there for the first half, and when he couldn't do the second half, Shay Charles came in, and it was sort of seamless and uninterrupted, and we just carried on. As Steve said, if Freddie Woodman had a blinder in the second half, we'd have scored 5 or 6. So yeah, it was good, and everybody played well. David Brooks, I thought, put in a really decent performance as well, and he played for longer than he normally does. He was on for about 75, 80 minutes, I think, and overall it was. As Steve said, it was the perfect day. Everything that Russell Martin tried, right from McCarthy to taking Downs off at half time, we thought to rest him, so he could play against Cardiff. It all looked to have gone swimmingly well, but not. We found a way to make a mess of it, regardless.
As we do. Before we preview the Leicester game, let's do TSP Player of the Week. We're taking into account both the games. So, look at Steve's face. Any standout performances, Steve? It might just be based on that first 45 minutes against Preston.
Yeah, I mean, I thought both the sort of main attackers, Shay Adams and Adam Armstrong, were both excellent on Tuesday night against Preston, and like the movement and stuff, actually, that their interplay on Saturday at Cardiff was good for the first hour, but then we just kind of lost our way, and you also can't overlook the fact that both of those have missed all those chances. But I mean, I guess Stu Armstrong was good through both games. Could have scored like first minute. I think he hit the post against Cardiff with a great shot from 25 yards or so out. So yeah, and he was excellent. He was that kind of glue as he always is, linking the midfield and the attack against what wasn't particularly vociferous opposition on Tuesday. So yeah, I'll go for Stu Armstrong as my nomination.
Glenn, any names you want to chuck into the hat?
No, I was going to say Stu Armstrong as well, but I mean, I could almost as a joke say Joe Aribo because he actually got a shot in the goal against Cardiff, whereas no one else could. Yeah, I mean, defenders were okay. I'd stick Ryan Manning in there. I thought he played really well against Preston, and he's a player who don't get many flowers from the fan base, and I'm sure he won't get many votes in the poll, but I'll stick him in there anyway. I thought, yeah, okay. Ryan Manning had a decent game, and yeah, it's a shame he had to go off against Cardiff.
Is there anyone we've forgotten, Alfie?
No, nobody that's been forgotten. But I mean, Steve did mention Adam Armstrong and Che Adams, and I think on the merit of the performance against Preston, I will put Che Adams in the poll. He was really good. And
would you have left him on to get his hat trick?
Well, given what we've seen, what happened to Stuart Armstrong and Flynn Downs and things like that, I think at this point in the season you just can't take any risks over sentiment. No. So I was more than happy for him to bring him off. But I mean, he probably would have got it. He did have a chance for it, to be fair, didn't he? He did miss a chance for it. But his second goal was fantastic. If you watch it back, I mean, the back heel to was it David Brooks or Stewie, and then the run off finish as well. Yeah, that's a really good goal. So I will stick Che Adams in there, and we'll just have to try and forget about all the misses on Saturday.
Okay. Well, on Tuesday evening, Saints travel to Leicester. This is the rearranged fixture following their FA Cup run. I mean, it seems slightly less important than it did 48 hours ago. They had a win at the weekend, Steve, but they were quite lucky, weren't they, to come away with all 3 points?
Good Lord. I mean, Hamza Chowdhury is a player for Leicester who generally I don't think is especially popular. He seems to be one of these sort of young sort of upstarts. He's got a bit of an attitude. Thinks he's a lot better than he is. But he was their man of the match by a long distance on Saturday for the 3 goal line clearances, which I mean West Brom were. I'm trying to think in my head whether our attacking misfiring on Saturday was better or worse than West Brom's in that game against Leicester. It was absolutely extraordinary, some of the chances they passed up.
The playoffs are going to be fun, aren't they?
Oh, it's good. I mean, yeah, if we play West Brom, that's going to be XG hell. It's going to be like XG of 4 each, and it'll be 0-0, and we'll.
There's another name for the Netflix documentary.
Win or lose on penalties.
XG hell.
Leicester weren't especially impressive, but as they've been doing all season, they created basically 3 really good chances, missed a penalty and scored the other 2. And when you've got someone, I mean, I know he's in the sort of autumn of his career, but when you've got someone like Jamie Vardy up front, put the ball in the penalty area, and more often than not, the ball's probably going to end up in the back of the net. So, yeah, that's the concern that I think they've got the players that can just turn it on every so often, just at the point where everything looks as if it's about to fall apart. Whereas I think we're kind of the complete opposite. We kind of when everything's kind of fairly relaxed and chilled, we're brilliant. But then as soon as the pressure gets ratcheted up, it's unfortunately a different story.
You've chatted to a few of the Leicester fans, a few of their podcasts, more than most of us, Glenn. Do you think they would be expecting to be out of sight and home and hosed by now? What's their mood been like?
I don't know. You speak to a couple, and they were quite realistic. Even I think the lad we had on when we played them at home, Tom, he kind of said, "Well, we've won our first 5 games or whatever it was at the time, but we haven't played particularly well." He was quite realistic about the fact, and since Christmas, they've in terms of performances, they've been kind of pretty rotten most of the games, but they've managed to, obviously the big cushion that they had with the points they racked up in the first half of the season, they've managed to sort of like keep their heads above water just about. But they're definitely not as chirpy as they were at the start of the season, It comes with the territory of just having a bad run. I mean, they obviously thought they were going to win by 20 points and get 120 points or whatever, whatever the record is.
They wanted to beat Reading's record, didn't they?
Yeah, they were talking about beating that at the start of the season.
Like
but then you look at they've had all the financial stuff kind of hanging over their heads as well. I mean, there was never going to be enough joined up governance between the Premier League and the EFL for anything to happen this season. But then you look at their team. The midfield looks a very strong area. Ndidi, Winks, and Dewsbury Hall. That's three proper Premier League players, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mavididi was brilliant when we played them. When we played them at St Mary's, he was just unplayable. So, and obviously they've got Vardy or the hilarious Preston Daka to play up front. So,
hat-trick incoming.
Yeah, Daka hat-trick incoming. So, I mean, in defence, they we all know about Vestergaard, what he's good at and what he's not good at, and the pound shop David Luiz. Forgotten his name, Fass. He's got a mistake all over him, and I mean, every time he goes near the ball, you're waiting for him to do something stupid. So, I think they can be got at, but with regards to Leicester fans, I think they've possibly learnt a little bit of humility over the last sort of few months, and but it looks like it's all going to work out for them, as Steve said. I think if they promoted if they beat us, I think they might
if Leeds fail to win at Middlesbrough.
If Leeds fail to win, yeah. So yeah, it could be a big party day for them. But I think we go into it with kind of less pressure now, because I think we know that even if we win all three, the chances are we're not going to make the top two. So we've just got to go and enjoy ourselves and try and play on any sort of pressure they might be feeling. But yeah, it's just. I'm just still very, very disappointed about the way we've blown it, because I was looking forward to this game being absolutely massive for both teams, and it's not quite the same now. Said we needed to win the 3 games, we won 2 of them, and then blew it at the end. But that's us for you. So,
yeah, there was no room for a slip up, was there? Alfie, do you agree?
Nope.
Is it kind of like pressure off a little bit now on Tuesday night? We've kind of like settled for our fate, and looks like 4th place.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the table. What is it? It's 5 points off, 3 games to play for. So I mean, there's no chance, really. Obviously, hopefully that'll be clipped and I look stupid. There's obviously no chance. Yeah, they completely beaten, can't they? They lost 1-0 to Plymouth and Millwall in the last week, which is 2 poor results. They could be beaten. The pressure will be off. I think Russell Martin said to us after the game on Saturday at Cardiff that they've been outsiders the whole time anyway, so nothing's really changed for him. But I'm pretty sure that privately, behind closed doors, something will have changed, and that veil will have come off now. They need what they need to do is prove to themselves that they can beat one of these top teams. I think they did that against Leeds, obviously back in September, but so much has changed since then. Didn't beat Ipswich, didn't get over the line. Obviously got thumped by Leicester last time as well. So I think there's an element of just proving to themselves they can go toe to toe with these teams and beat them. I'm interested to see what the team is, because if Flynn Downs is missing again, that's obviously another talking point. Will he want Jack Stevens in there just because of the way that they crumbled again? And last time they crumbled a couple of times, this only the once, but he brought him back in. Ryan Manning, he said hopefully he'll be fit, but if he's not, that's maybe the way they get Jack Stevens in. So there's a couple of different things to look at with the team. But yeah, I totally agree with Glenn. I was so looking forward to this being the biggest game of the season, like each of the last 4 have been. And now it won't feel that way now. It's probably huge for Leicester and not for us. So it's going to be quite a deflating one to be part of, I think.
Let's do some score predictions. If you're watching live, then make sure you drop us a little score prediction. Let us know what you think. Let's go around the screen and get the score predictions. Glenn's warming up the supercomputer. Steve, how did you see this one? I mean, it was quite a heavy defeat, wasn't it, at St Mary's back at the start of the season? So can you see us getting anything out of this?
I can. I think... I mean, it depends how seriously we take it now, whether we do still believe that there is a slip up in these teams above us. If we've got a little bit of belief, then yeah, by all means we can go there and cause them issues. I mean, as we've discussed, their defence is a bit ropey. can be got at. They gave up so many chances against West Brom that, if we create half as many, then you've got chances. It's then just about sticking the ball in the back of the net. And while we're obviously sort of down on our kind of conversion rate from Cardiff, you look at the goals for column, we have scored more than 80 goals this season. So yeah, you've got to back yourself once at least, I think. I just kind of think it's going to be a result that doesn't actually suit either of us. Obviously Leicester win, they're more or less up. But I fancy us to get a point, which probably doesn't really help either of us. 2-2.
2-2. Okay. Glenn, what's the computer saying tonight?
Computer says no.
The random number generator. Number wang.
I've been pushing this theme since the start that, when the pressure is off a little bit, we tend to do better. So I think we're going to go there and win. I don't think they're great. And I think we've got a good chance to win it. A lot will depend on if Flynn Downs plays. Obviously, because we can't win without him. Certainly not the way we try and do things at the moment. We can't win without him. So if Downs is fit, then I'd happily predict us to win 2-1. But I do, on Alfie's point, I almost certainly think he'll go for the formation that has Jack Stevens at left back, like he did against Ipswich and like he did against West Brom.
Yep. I
think that'll be the way that he goes against the better teams. And Leicester are certainly one of those. But just for shits and giggles, really, I'll just go for a 2-1 win.
Could all be back on. Alfie, does it depend on the lineup and the team use? Like you said, it's quite a bit up in the air, isn't there? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think from just asking a few questions when we actually got to Cardiff, and Russell Martin said that it was pretty close for Flynn Downs, but I don't think he was as close as maybe he let on. So that makes me worry.
He did that before, didn't he? And he was out for like a month.
Yeah, so that makes me worry. And further to Glenn's point, I think they played 9 games without Flynn Downs this season. They've won 2 of them, which for a team who are 4th in the division is remarkable. It's almost like when they went, 3 years without winning a game with Stuart Armstrong, or without Stuart Armstrong, sorry, from December 2019 to 2022. So I've only, maybe producer Alex can tell me differently, but I think I've only predicted a defeat once this season, and that was against Leeds in September. So I am going to go for a 2-1 Leicester win. I don't like to do it.
What, in the hope that we win 3-0?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
But if you are watching live, do stick your score predictions in the comments, and we will have an extra podcast on Thursday evening at 7:15 to cover off that game. So make sure you stick a note of that in your calendar, and we'll see you Thursday night at 7:15 for that one. A couple of other bits this week. I just want to talk about the safe standing area, which is going to span the whole of the northern stand from, I think, blocks 38 to 48. Some pictures from the women's game today. Looks like the work's already started. This is going to be potentially your seat for the next home game, Steve, as well. They've been putting the rails in already to get ahead of the curve. Yeah,
it looks as if there's I think 13 rows of rails that I counted on some of the photos that have been doing the rounds. So if so, I think my row will just about fit in there on AA. So I'll have something to lean on, which would be nice for my aging limbs. But yeah, I mean, it's good that the club's just getting on with things. It does seem as if it's a relatively quick and straightforward process.
Well, I hadn't realised. I thought they would actually have to swap out I thought it was a different kind of seat, but from the pictures, they've literally just glued metal rails to the seats that are already there. It looks pretty straightforward, as you say.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, obviously, what you will have seen on all of the old sort of demos of the rail seating is like the continental seats, which are basically metal, and they're just dead flat, and they just flip up and down but more importantly, they actually lock into place, so they lock out for domestic. This was like particularly in Germany, where obviously they've got safe standing throughout basically all of the leagues, but up until this season in UEFA competitions, you weren't allowed them. You had to replace them with seats. So literally for European games, the seats are locked down in place. So you basically don't really have an awful lot of choice other than to vaguely sit in it.
That's where my confusions come from. Then I've
Yeah,
seen kind of like the
so
early prototypes of the safe standing, and I actually thought it was quite a bit of work, and maybe that's why they're getting ahead
so
of the
there's yeah, I mean, so Cardiff have got safe standing. So most of the away end yesterday was safe standing with the rails, and yeah, literally all they've done is they've installed the rails basically at the same depth as each of the rows of seats, so the person behind can just stand and lean on it, yeah, it goes literally from front to back. So I imagine unless they're doing more during the week, I imagine it's probably just the back sort of 13 rows or so that have got it for the Stoke game this week.
For now, yeah.
But then after that, they can then go full steam ahead with all the rest of it.
That's where the money
playoff game will have a full safe standing end, maybe.
Interesting. Go on, Glenn. Sorry.
No, I said, how high are the actual rails that are in front of you when you're standing?
So when you're standing, it's basically at sort of chest high, so you can kind of lean on it.
Right, so it's fairly high, yeah. Oh, so you can sort of lean with your arms folded, sort of.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of just
with your head in your hands.
Yeah,
I was going to say. Short people are going to struggle.
Very apt for yesterday. That
there's a lot of money being spent elsewhere around the ground as well, Alfie. That was the story this week. Not only the northern stand, but it sounds like obviously the away fans are moving. We know that's been confirmed, and that is potentially where all the money's going to be spent, and that they're trying to enhance the atmosphere of the stadium as best they can.
Yeah, but also things like food and drink and catering and whatnot. They're going to be obviously opening up outdoor areas that you can go to at halftime and things like that. So, number one, to get people into the stadium probably earlier, spending a bit more cash. But also because I just think at the moment there's probably just not enough facilities for, if you want to go and get a pint at halftime now, it's an absolute nightmare. So they're just hoping to improve that kind of thing. There'll probably be some, little things that don't matter too much, but are a bit of a boost, like screens and stuff going up like that. They're just hoping to improve the overall experience of the stadium, which I'm all for. I know that obviously it's a bit divisive at the moment in terms of moving people around, and it's always a bugger if you have to move from your seat. And I know that Glen's obviously going to be one of those. So I feel for those people, but I think that realistically, to expect everything to stay exactly the same forever is not likely. But I think there's probably been a couple that have been moved a couple of times in quick succession. But yeah, by the sounds of it, hopefully St Mary's will be a better stadium next season than it has been for the last few years.
For some of the external concerts as well, I guess I remember like the Killers gig and just not being able to get a pint because it was so busy. It was just, you just think it's an opportunity to make some money, and they haven't been making the most of it. So you can kind of see what they're doing there. But yeah, Glenn, our block, you and I, we're going to have to move because that's where the family area is going to be. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm kind of like, well, do I want to go in the northern end? Do I want to stand, or do I want to see what they offer? Because it looks like there's going to be a price increase as well. They're talking about maybe 10 to 15%. They've been about that. They've been upfront about that, but it's going to cost us more.
Well, at the moment, blocks 11 to 15, I think it is, are the designated. In the Premier League, they were £399 for the adult seat, and last year it was £349. So that's considerably cheaper than elsewhere in the ground, and that was sort of triumphed as a sort of policy. The club could say, we've got these cheap season tickets, and that happens to be the sort of place I'm sat in now. So they're not going to be able to pick up 4 blocks and put them somewhere else, because obviously there's going to be people still remaining from. So it'd be interesting to see how that works out. So we've got the kind of the mystery of waiting until it's confirmed what division we're in before we find out what prices are going to be. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't have too much choice because on many occasions I still go with my dad, and he's nearly 80, and he ain't going to be standing up for 90 minutes. So, if it was me, I'm just about young enough to still be able to stand up for 90 minutes. So that's fine. But so I don't have a lot of choice. So I think it's going to cost a fair bit more money next year, which you kind of expect. But is it going to be 10% or is it going to be 35%? That's the that's the thing that is still to be revealed with the pricing. I don't really see why they couldn't have released the pricing for the rest of the ground at the time that it was all announced. But
you probably suspect there's one or two reasons. Either one, they want to get people into the Northern with the the carrot of these are going to be the cheapest ones that we do offer. So come and join us, and probably as well if they're going to be in the Premier League or the Championship, I would imagine it wouldn't be a surprise if the pricing was slightly different. To be fair, just in terms of the offering. So maybe there's things like that are at play.
Yeah. So I mean, it could work out well for everybody, but I think if you're in the block 11 to 15 at the moment, I think you're going to end up paying considerably more money. I don't really see how that's going to be avoided, but we shall see. Maybe we'll be surprised. But,
we might be pleasantly surprised. You don't know. We'll wait for that email. A couple of other bits, Steve. I just want to touch on the women's team. They played the London City Lionesses. It was the last home game of the season. Good win as well today. One game left away at Charlton. Now, I thought Charlton were going to have to win this, but it looks like the league's kind of done and dusted.
I mean, technically, Charlton can still win the league. I think they are 3 points behind Crystal Palace, but Palace have, I think their goal difference is like 20 goals better. Palace have outscored everyone by, I think, 17 or 18 goals. So yeah, they are as good as up, I would say. So Palace got Sunderland at home in the last game. That actually looked for a while as if that was going to basically be a winner takes all game. But Charlton beat them. Charlton beat them today, so that's basically effectively handed the title to Palace, really. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, we can still finish second. So still something to play for in that game, and it's quite a big game against Charlton. They've been up there. They were top for a long period of the season, but just fell away at the end and lost a couple of games they really shouldn't have done. But that's kind of been our problem too. Mirroring the men's first team, where they've dropped some silly points against some of the lesser sides, especially against the sides that aren't affiliated to pro men's clubs. I think those have been the points that they'll probably look back on and say, we left those ones out on the field there. Mm-hmm. Frustrating, but only one team goes up, as we've discussed ad nauseum. And well, still, at least we have Pompey to look forward to in that division as well next season. So that'll be fun. And the money of Newcastle, which will be slightly less pleasant.
Jason Wilcox was the other story this week, Alfie. I think we've kind of said everything we need to say on it, really, but it was confirmed this week, wasn't it? We knew that was going to come, and I think the word reluctantly in the first line of their statement kind of summed up how that's gone.
Yeah, we all knew that once it was obviously broken, he resigned. It was going to be a case of he's going to leave, and if you want him to work for you now, and I've just seen that he's on the telly in the semi-finals, wasn't he? The FA Cup semi-finals. So
he's got his work cut out.
To be fair, I mean, I think in terms of you're at Southampton and going on your first game for Man United, being chucking away a 3-goal lead, probably ready for the challenge, I'd imagine. But yeah, it's no surprises. I think it is genuinely a case of thanks for your efforts. Good luck. Don't let the door touch on the way out. You've come for 9 months. You've promised us a long-term project, and you've left for a better job. So fair play to you. Fair enough. Southampton move on. They'll have their list of men, and hopefully they'll bring somebody in. Relatively quickly. It's not going to affect the last few games of the season, and I'm sure that everybody will wish him the best.
Yeah. The final thing I just want to get your thoughts on, not necessarily related to Saints either, is the FA Cup and the FA's decision to scrap the replays from next season. They've insisted that all parties have accepted it, and they've said it was done with the best interest of all the clubs at heart. Glen, a lot of clubs have kind of like released statements, haven't they, saying how annoyed they are about it. It doesn't seem like it's going to affect us. I mean, it turns out we would have played in one of the last replays, wasn't it, that Watford game, which I guess was the fourth round?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's separate issues at play here. I mean, with regards to Saints, we're a relatively big club, even if we're in the Championship. So playing replays, not playing replays probably doesn't make a huge difference to us. But that's not the point, is it? The point is that, they say all parties are happy with it. Yeah, all parties they actually consulted, which we assume were the 20 Premier League clubs, and that was it.
If they even bothered going down into the lower half of that division.
That's exactly what I was going to say. How the Premier League works. It's the Super League lot, and that's it. And so, yeah, I like the fact there's been sort of universal condemnation of it from anyone who's not in the Premier League, and all the pundits have had their say and stuff like that. I just hope they keep it going. I mean, ultimately, it probably won't do any good because the FA Cup is run by the same organisation that runs the Premier League. So it's another example of, I mean, the competition for me has, it's such a magical thing when I was younger. And obviously we won it, and I remember that. But it's been eroded over the last few years, and VAR has made it a shambles. It's got that took a big chunk of integrity away from it. Because of VAR in some games but not in others in the same competition. It's ridiculous. So basically you're playing two different sets of rules depending on where the game happens to be. I don't know, it's just one isolated incident, but anyone who saw the Coventry Man United game just now, no VAR commentary could argue that they score a last minute winner, and instead it gets disallowed by a toenail.
Yeah.
So I think the FA Cup has kind of the shine's gone off it, certainly over the last sort of 4 or 5 years since the VAR thing's been going on, and this is another thing that takes the shine off even further, and it's a shame. And and I don't think people really appreciate quite how much earning a replay at a Premier League club, even if it's a relatively small Premier League club, how far that money goes when you're talking about a level 4, 5, 6 club. That now doesn't have that carrot. They just have to hope they get drawn away in the first game.
And also how exciting it is to watch those games. They're always.
Yeah, I was going to add, Glen summed it up brilliantly. Not that my testament's worth anything to anybody, but I worked for Eastleigh Football Club for 2 years before I did this job, and if anyone's in any doubt about the value of replays, you rest completely assured that there are clubs maybe below Eastleigh's level slightly who that money has meant that they've come up through the leagues. They've had a chance to survive when maybe they couldn't otherwise. But also this season, Eastleigh taking Newport to a replay at the Silver Lake. It's not away to Old Trafford or anything, but it was their biggest gate of the season, I'd imagine, by quite some distance. It's the chance for replay games that you didn't have in the initial round to be selected by TV, because obviously, Man United, Wrexham and Salford were all picked in the initial round. Once they all go through or get knocked out, you've got a chance to be picked in the replay, and that could be hundreds of thousands of pounds just in broadcast money. So, if anybody is in doubt, these clubs, they really do need that money. And if you get the chance to, and like you said, the chance to go to Bolton or something in a replay for an Eastleigh fan is, one of their biggest moments. So I think it's a massive shame. And these League Two clubs, National League clubs, they play more games than half the Premier League teams anyway. Man City and things like that are an exception because they go to the end of every single competition. But other clubs shouldn't be punished just because they've got hundreds of millions of quid to be able to do that. So I think it's a massive shame. And if they don't, just renege on that slightly, I'll be gutted.
I mean, if Arteta wants his players to play less, just be rubbish in cup competitions, get knocked out in the first round, and then you can rest every midweek. Easy.
And am I right in thinking, Steve, just quickly, it's due to the expansion of the European dates? Is that right? They've gone from like 6 weeks to 10 weeks or something, so the European clubs wouldn't be able to play on those dates. That's kind of how they're dressing it up? And
basically, yes. So the UEFA calendar has changed because all three of the competitions are moving to this new absolute nonsense Swiss style one big group stage for each of the three competitions. So what that entails is there's 36 teams in there rather than the 32 that's been in previously, and as a result they've managed to squeeze in 2 more games for everybody. So everybody, whichever pot you are drawn in, so you're still drawn into the 4 pots as you have been previously, but what you get is you play 2 games against teams from each of the 4 pots, and the teams that you play are randomly drawn to the extent that UEFA had to actually come out and clarify that, yeah, we're not going to be able to do the fixtures draw on sort of on TV because it's so complex and so tedious that. I mean, given how bad these draw procedures are anyway, the fact that even UEFA are binning it is shows how ridiculous the thing is.
That's not going to be manipulated at all, then, is it?
Exactly. That's the first thing. If you can't even see it being made, how can you trust its integrity? It's an absolute joke.
And so as a result, there's 2 extra game weeks for the group stage. So they've basically hidden behind this and said, well, because we've got these extra games, we're not. We can't do this to the players. We can't. We need to look out for the welfare of these players coming from clubs whose season finish on the 19th of May, and then on the 22nd of May are playing a post-season friendly in Melbourne. Yeah. It's an absolute joke, the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, the concept of not playing replays, I can accept that there are some arguments in favour of it in terms of the players do play a lot of games. The pace of the game is such these days that fitness and player welfare should be more considered. But at the end of the day, you can't give with one hand and take with the other in terms of saying, well, we care about players whilst at the same time flogging them to death with more games in Europe just because they're more valuable. It's nonsense. But ultimately, the biggest scandal of this is the lack of consultation. Yeah. You got more than 700 teams enter the FA Cup every year. Most of them obviously don't get out of the qualifying rounds, but it's interesting that the qualifying rounds are still having replays. And yet rounds 1 and 2, which obviously don't feature Premier League or Championship clubs, you can't have replays there. So you won't have, for example, from this season where Charlton and Cray Valley Paper Mills drew, and they managed to take him back to a replay at their ramshackle little non-league ground.
Yeah, and we all watched it on the telly, didn't we?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
They'd have made £70,000 out of that broadcast money, I imagine, for that replay.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be a few more clubs speaking out this week.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But you've got I think we're up to more than 100 clubs now that have made statements. Interestingly, not many Championship ones.
No, there'll be a few ex-players as well, I noticed today. I'm sure there'll be more to come. That's pretty much it for this week's episode. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. You can get in touch by dropping us a DM on any of the socials or an email via the website if you've got something to share or maybe just something to get off your chest. Do check out the new merch store as well, shop.totalsaints.co.uk. New items being added there all the time. And we're also on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. As I mentioned at the start, we've got 4 tiers on there ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of the tiers comes with different perks, including the weekly shout outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thanks to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe and Mike E. They're all in our Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall and Mark Littlewood, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget, we will see you on Thursday evening at 7:15 for our post-Leicester live stream.